Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of Harry Potter Theory. Today we're going to be discussing retcons, specifically all of the retcons made by JK Rowling after the series had ended. I should start off by making a clear distinction between what retcon used to mean and what it means now, because somehow the term has evolved over time into something else altogether. Depending on which version of retcon you subscribe to, you're going to have very different expectations for this list. The original interpretation of retcon, which stands for Retroactive Continuity, referred broadly to adding new information to previously told stories to expand or reinterpret the narrative. A good example of this would be JK Rowling revealing, through extended publications, that witches and wizards vanished their poop via magic before the Hogwarts plumbing system came into effect. And the more commonly understood modern definition of retcon refers specifically to changes that contradict previously established facts in the narrative, whether intentional or unintentional. The distinction here is that this interpretation places an emphasis on these new facts conflicting with existing canon. A third definition I found online seems to support either. A literary device in which facts in the world of a fictional work that have been established through the narrative itself are adjusted, ignored, supplemented, or contradicted by a subsequently published work that recontextualizes or breaks continuity with the former. But for the sake of today's video, we're going to separate them, first placing our sights on works that contradict the source material, then shifting our perspective to more recently introduced content that supplements the source material but doesn't change it. Starting with the former. Adjustments, Type 2. Voldemort's Child. This one could really be put in either category depending on how far you want to scrutinize it. I will also briefly add that I know The Cursed Child isn't popular. For those unfamiliar, it's marketed as the 8th story, a continuation following the children of the characters that we grew up with. The events of The Cursed Child occur 19 years after the events of the Deathly Hallows, and follows Harry Potter, who is now head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement at the Ministry of Magic, and his younger son, Albus Potter, who's just about to embark on his own journey at Hogwarts. But perhaps the most highly contested aspect of this continuation is the introduction of Voldemort's daughter. Yes, you heard me, Delphine. Though Rowling has affirmed that the play should be accepted as part of the canon, most fans aren't having any of this. The notion that Voldemort could have a child when he was born entirely devoid of certain emotions is just one example of something the Cursed Child did that didn't sit well with fans. The conception of Delphine, Voldemort and Bellatrix's daughter, is said to have occurred sometime in the mid to late 1990s, in secret at the Malfoy Manor. This of course meant that her birth coincided with the events of the original books. We just never had any indication of it. At this time, Delphine, who also goes by Delphi in The Cursed Child, became the only known living heir of Salazar Slytherin after Voldemort died in the Battle of Hogwarts in 1998. Her birth was kept a secret by her parents because they feared that their infamous reputations would place her in danger, especially in the event of their deaths. The main argument against this aspect of it being canon is that Voldemort doesn't feel emotions like love, due to being born under a love potion himself, and therefore could never have possibly conceived a child with Bellatrix. But what I'll say to that is that you certainly don't need to love to procreate, and while I have a hard time imagining Voldemort and Bellatrix doing the deed, I do sort of understand why he might want to preserve his bloodline. But there are also some major issues with this, the first being that Voldemort was perhaps the most arrogant villain in all of cinema. Even as his Horcruxes fell, Voldemort maintained the facade that he was somehow invincible, and I can't see why someone in this position would feel the need to further their bloodline. I also can't imagine that he would even want to extend his bloodline in the event that he failed. And the next major issue is that if Bellatrix truly was pregnant during the Harry Potter books, then she would have been visibly pregnant when the Golden Trio are taken to Malfoy Manor. Overall, the whole concept is a bit of a mess, and the general consensus among fans is that it can't truly be canon, because right there on the front cover, it very clearly reads, based on an original news story by JK Rowling, John Tiffany, and Jack Thorne. Hermione is black. The subject of Hermione's ethnicity has garnered a considerable amount of attention in more recent years, partly due to black actress Noma Dumezweni playing the role of Hermione in The Cursed Child, and partly due to Rowling. To some, the obvious answer is that Hermione is Caucasian. After all, that's how she was portrayed in the films. Emma Watson, who played Hermione, is white. It's as simple as that. There's also the fact that Rowling once remarked that Emma Watson, besides being too pretty for the role, was otherwise perfect, which sort of suggests that Emma was what she had in mind all along. The next piece of evidence supporting that Hermione is Caucasian comes from an illustration published on JK Rowling's website in 2004. This illustration, drawn by Rowling herself, depicts an early draft of the Midnight Duel chapter, where we see Neville, Ron, Harry, Hermione, and Gary, later renamed to Dean Thomas. However, all of this was contradicted by a tweet that Rowling published in 2015. Canon: brown eyes, frizzy hair, and very clever. White skin was never specified. Rowling loves Black Hermione. Given that book canon is up to the discretion of the author, and that Rowling herself has left this very ambiguous, the final verdict on Hermione's ethnicity is that it is entirely up to reader interpretation. However, this really does feel like something that she changed her mind on later. Snape's spell. In the Fantastic Beasts film, Grindelwald's acolytes successfully capture the fabled Qilin, a mythical creature involved in the wizarding election process. However, not long after capturing the creature, Grindelwald decides to cut its throat. Why? Well, Grindelwald had plans to reanimate the Qilin's corpse as a sort of inferi in order to guarantee that he would be selected as Supreme Mugwump, and reanimate the corpse he certainly does. However, provided that the reanimated Qilin would need to be devoid of scars, as to not draw attention, Grindelwald needed a spell that would heal any physical marks left on the Qilin's body, and it's at this point that he uses a spell we have never seen before, Vulnera Sedentur. Seemingly, this spell was part of Grindelwald's necromancy ritual where the Qilin was revived. But where have we seen Vulnera Sedentur before? Why, spouted out of the mouth of Severus Snape, of course. And before the Secrets of Dumbledore, we Harry Potter fans knew the spell as the counter-curse for Snape's signature spell and his own creation, Sectum Sempra. Sectum Sempra is a vicious dark curse that acts like an invisible sword, causing lacerations, hemorrhaging, and cuts upon its target. And Vulnera Sedentur is the counter-curse that heals them up afterwards. There is the possibility that this spell existed prior to Snape's usage, but I highly doubt it. I think that Vulnera Sedentur was deliberately created as a counter-curse to his signature spell, and I think that Grindelwald using it 28 years before Snape was even born is a canon blunder. McGonagall's age. We know a lot about Minerva McGonagall, her love interests, her career path, her parents, thanks to extra publications from Rowling, but one important aspect about her character remains unclear: her age. And the reason her age is subject to such a considerable amount of speculation is because of her appearance in Fantastic Beasts 2: The Crimes of Grindelwald, where we see a young woman by the name of McGonagall at Hogwarts. A woman who, if I had to guess, is in her 20s or so. We know that McGonagall teaches alongside Dumbledore at some point in the past, and we know that at one point she's a young professor at the school. So, what's the problem? Well, all of this would be fine if it had been consistent with what JK Rowling had revealed about McGonagall in the original series. You see, originally, Rowling stated that McGonagall started teaching at the school in 1956 at the age of 21. However, Fantastic Beasts 2 takes place in the year 1927, 29 years before she's supposed to have taught there, which just doesn't really add up. Expanding on this, if she really had started at the school in 1956 at the age of 21, then it means that she was born in the year 1935. This adds to the confusion even more, as that's 7 or 8 years after she's seen on screen. Harry Potter canon also supports Rowling's claim that McGonagall began teaching there in 1956. In a 1995 conversation between Umbridge and McGonagall, McGonagall reveals that she'd been working at Hogwarts 39 years this December, which is consistent with what Rowling had said initially. Some fans argue that it's another McGonagall, but that doesn't really make any sense. Time Turners. No plot device rivals Time Turners when it comes to unraveling carefully constructed stories, rewriting events with little to no explanation, and leaving logic scattered in its wake. When Rowling first introduced the Time Turner in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, she wisely imposed strict limitations on its use, allowing a user to travel no more than 5 hours into the past. And it was this thoughtful restriction that sort of ensured the device played a controlled role in the story. However, this careful approach was thrown out the window with Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, where Time Turners suddenly gained the ability to fling characters decades into the past. The result was a chaotic, convoluted tale that undermined the varied rules she had set for time travel in her universe. The narrative spiraled into a mess of alternate timelines, inexplicable events, and a plot that seemed more concerned with spectacle than coherence. And so what began as a clever storytelling tool to explore the consequences of small changes to the past evolved into an unwieldy device that unraveled the integrity of the Wizarding World's lore. Well, if you consider Cursed Child to be canon, that is. Supplementary information. Type 1. Dumbledore is gay. We certainly can't talk about Harry Potter retcons without discussing the big reveal by JK Rowling in 2007 that Hogwarts headmaster Albus Dumbledore is gay. During a Q&A, Rowling shared that Dumbledore was in love with Gellert Grindelwald, and that it was this love that profoundly influenced his actions and character. While some fans argue that the intense relationship between Dumbledore and Grindelwald, as described in the books, contained subtle hints of this dynamic, the books themselves never explicitly address his sexuality. However, the absence of explicit acknowledgement in the books led some to view this announcement as an afterthought. Critics have debated whether an author's post-publication statements can truly become part of the canon if they are not present in the original text, arguing that this approach undermines the self-contained nature of the story. However, in subsequent films, like the Fantastic Beasts series, the story has explored Dumbledore's relationship with Grindelwald more overtly, including an explicit acknowledgement of Dumbledore's love for Grindelwald in The Secrets of Dumbledore. This added some emotional depth to Dumbledore's reluctance to confront Grindelwald as he terrorized the Wizarding World. No plumbing. Hogwarts was founded around 990 AD, when 4 10th century witches and wizards got together and decided that they had, in the Sorting Hat's own words, the self-same yearning to make the world's best magic school. This time period differed from the current time period in many ways, and the Hogwarts castle was no exception to changes through the passage of time. Over the years, as technology progressed, the castle was outfitted with upgrades as to reflect these new technologies, and one supremely important piece of technology that we didn't always have around, that is often overlooked, is the toilet. According to Wikipedia, the first modern flushable toilet was described in 1596 by Sir John Harrington, an English courtier and the godson of Queen Elizabeth I. Harrington's device called for a 2-foot-deep oval bowl, waterproofed with pitch, resin, and wax, and fed by water from an upstairs cistern. This meant that for hundreds of years, the Hogwarts castle had no toilets. In fact, according to JK Rowling, Hogwarts wasn't outfitted with proper toilets until the 18th century. So what, you might ask, did witches and wizards do to relieve themselves before the introduction of toilets in the castle? Well, this peculiar 2019 tweet that no one asked for from the Wizarding World Twitter gives us some insight. Hogwarts didn't always have bathrooms. Before adopting Muggle plumbing methods in the 18th century, witches and wizards simply relieved themselves wherever they stood and vanished the evidence. Huh? Nagini. Nagini is best known as Voldemort's loyal and sinister snake companion, and was eventually revealed to be one of his Horcruxes. The character was understood as an extremely intelligent serpent, possibly magically enhanced, but there was never any indication that she was a human. Enter Fantastic Beasts. In The Crimes of Grindelwald, Nagini's character is reframed as a maledictus, a witch cursed to transform into an animal, in her case a snake, that will eventually lose their human form entirely. This introduces a tragic element to her character, shifting her from Voldemort's seemingly mindless serpent companion in the Harry Potter series to a victim of fate. But while the concept of maledictuses enriches the Wizarding World's lore, Nagini's limited screen time and lack of meaningful development in the film make her backstory a little bit underwhelming. There's also the problem that no hint of her human origin exists in the books, making this revelation feel like a retrofitted twist rather than an organic extension of her story. Regardless of all of this, however, I found it fascinating. I'll end the video here because, well, there have been a lot of things introduced since the series ended, many of which fit the Type 1 definition that is supplementary information. I take no issue with this stuff so long as it remains in this category and doesn't contradict the original story, because as far as I'm concerned, the more lore, the better. If you want to know about more of this extended lore, then check out some of my Harry Potter history, documentary-style videos, as these highlight quite a lot of it. Until next time, remember, it does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live.